I would like to begin this session by asking you a question for you to think about. If you think back over the past 2 years, what is it that has personally scared you the most about the changes that you've seen in the world around you? And I want you to take a moment to think about that properly. Because if your first reaction to that question was anything like mine, it was, oh, I'm not scared, nothing, that's all fine. Which is normal for people to do that. But just take a moment to reflect and to think, what are the times when you felt most unsettled, most uncertain? And what is it that scared you the most? Just take a moment to think about that. And I can share with you that for me, it's been the feeling of other people threatening my safety through their selfishness. The feeling that other people can be idiots, and it doesn't only affect them, which I would be quite happy with. That would be their lookout, that would be their problem. It affects me and my family too. And if something like this has been on your mind, it's important to recognise that this is a normal reaction to a situation where you can perceive a threat, but you can't protect yourself or your family from that threat. Feeling scared of that's normal. It shows that you recognise that there's a threat, and that means you can think about and you can do something to protect yourself and to protect the people who you love. Together, we have the power and the responsibility to support each other, and through that to influence others in a positive way. And that's good for everyone, not just for one person's selfishness. So as you're learning this session, you have the power to support the people who you lead. So we can at least begin there. So I'd like to put 2 ideas to you to kind of frame or set up what I'm going to talk about in this session. Firstly, what you have been taught about leadership development for the last 50 years is wrong. And secondly, change doesn't exist. So hopefully you're now thinking, what? What's he talking about? How's that possible? I'll explain both of those statements as I go through this session. And we're going to have some discussion sections as well. There'll be 3 points during this session where you'll go off into small groups and work on something together. I'm going to define leadership as a relationship within which one person feels safe to defer to the decisions of another person. And I'm going to define change as the perception of difference over time. Now, I think it's always important to look at what are the underlying processes, what are the basic principles that are driving this. It's all too easy to get into the world of complicated metaphors and overcomplicated descriptions. I'm always keen to look at basic principles. So the fundamental underlying neurological process which drives a fear of change is the way that we build an abstract symbolic map, and we then interact with the outside world through that map. So if you've read about or you've studied NLP, you'll be very familiar with this concept that we don't interact with the outside world directly. We interact through a subjective reality that we call a map that we've created, and we'll look at the map because we can't look at reality. We can't experience reality directly. We can only experience reality in terms of what our senses are relating to us about that reality. Our greatest sense of safety and comfort comes from when the map matches the reality exactly. And when things are exactly the way that they're supposed to be. when things turn out exactly the way that you predicted that they would. When you go into your kitchen to make yourself a cup of tea, and the tea is exactly where you thought it would be. If you went into your kitchen to make a cup of tea and the tea's moved, and you're the only person at home, you might feel a bit uncomfortable or a bit unsettled. You might think, what's happened? How did this happen? So our greatest problems in life come from the discovery that other people have their own predictions and their own plans as well, and they're different to yours. See, the unfortunate reality is that you have to coexist in a confined physical space, the planet, with other people who are also trying to impose their map onto the real world. If you've ever lived or worked with somebody who thought that things belonged in a different place to where you wanted to keep them, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So sometimes, as we've seen over the last 15 months or so, it's been getting on for 2 years really, the real world makes up its own rules too, and we all have to react and we have to figure out a new reality. So why is fear of change an important factor? Well, because at times of crisis and external change, we're most likely to ally ourselves with leaders, and those leaders are not always going to be the most obvious people. Let's think about leadership not as a set of traits or skills, but simply as a relationship. I said that what you've been taught about leadership is wrong. And that's because the global leadership development industry is focused on teaching you how to be a leader by copying the behaviours of a leader. Whoever gets to decide who this leader is, who you're copying, I don't know. So what's wrong is that leadership is not an action. It's not a behaviour, it's not something that you do. Leadership is a relationship. Leadership's not something that one person has. People have long argued about whether leaders are born or bred, and I think the answer is neither. They're created only in the moment that they are needed. Now, again, consider the events of the past 2 years. Who are the leaders that have emerged from things like the challenge of climate change or COVID? In climate change, who are the leaders who have emerged? Are they the politicians or the corporate figureheads? No, the leaders of the debate on climate change have been people like Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough. These are the people who are speaking up and being brave enough to talk about things that other people are worried about. Because at a time like that, not everybody has a voice. So a leader is literally the person who you follow. It's the person who you can see walking in front of you. And if you follow in their footsteps, then you know the ground is safe to walk on, and you trust that you will get to the destination that they are leading towards, even if you can't see where that is or what that is. So I think the most obvious evidence for the problems in leadership development that I mentioned is the sheer number of leadership theories and models. And in science like physics and chemistry and so on, there were times in the past where we had lots of different models to explain the same things. But now we have, in most of these sorts of basic areas, we just have one model that just explains everything. Because our methods have improved, our observations have improved, we've built equipment to take measurements that we didn't have in the past, 50 or 100 years ago or something. So I think there's a similarity. Actually, there's a comparison that we can make to this proliferation of leadership models. It's the idea that used to be very common, that the Earth is at the centre of the universe. It's interesting how some people are kind of going back to this theory that the Earth is flat. But no, I haven't heard anybody going back to the idea that the Earth is at the centre of the universe. It's equally would be an equally interesting idea, I think, for some people to hold. So the idea that the Earth is at the centre of the universe, centre of the heavens, goes back thousands of years. And the philosopher Ptolemy produced charts and calculations that supported this model. that predicted the movement of the stars. And people used to use it for long-distance navigation. Sailors used to use his charts for navigation, so they worked perfectly well. His charts predicted the movement of objects in the solar system, so the stars, the planets, sun, moon. But occasionally there were visiting objects like comets and meteors, asteroids, that were not so easily explained. So what he did was he invented ever more complicated additional rules to explain observations that didn't fit his model. And the reason that his model was so persistent was because it worked well enough for people to use it, to navigate. And I think this is quite similar to leadership development models, that there are so many of them, but they kind of fit what people observe well enough that people will tend to attach themselves to a favourite model. So a model predicts, for example, that a leader is decisive and supportive and analytical, and you agree, you say, yes, I can think of somebody who I knew who was decisive and supportive and analytical, so that model's true, I like that one. And then we can have another model that predicts that a leader is cautious and directive and intuitive, and you agree with that one. You can think, yes, I remember a guy I used to work for, and he was definitely cautious and directive and intuitive, and that was great leadership. And but you can't agree with both because they're contradictory. So because going back to Ptolemy's model, because all of the objects in the solar system are part of the same system, you could actually make any one of them the centre of the universe. You could make Jupiter the centre of the universe. And that would allow you to predict the movements of all of the others because they're in a contained system. But none of these predict the outliers. See, if a model doesn't cover every possibility, then it isn't a complete model. So thanks to the observations of many, many scientists, Copernicus in 1543 published his thesis that the sun is the centre of the solar system. And now we have one simple model that explains all the movements that we can observe, and it explains the motions of visitors such as comets and stray asteroids. Now, one unified model, one theory, explained everything that we could observe, and therefore that's the one that we've stuck with. Now, leadership development is big business. So the research site trainingindustry.com, they value the leadership development market at $366 billion globally. That's huge. So it's little wonder that there are so many theories. What we don't have is a single unified theory that makes all of those obsolete. And with the value of the industry, maybe we never will. But I'd like to offer one. Back in 2018, as part of a qualification that I was studying, I conducted some primary research into leadership, and in particular how future leaders are selected. And the inspiration came from working with a number of global corporates on talent programs, and being asked the same question by a number of different HR leaders. And the question they were asking me was, how can we be so bad at predicting potential? The challenge was that they were spending huge amounts of money trying to profile and predict future leaders, but the people they selected for their high potential programs were no better than the people who they had not seen as future leaders, the people who they thought, they're never going to get promoted. So they kept reinventing the leadership development programs, but that wasn't the problem. I think the problem was in how they were defining a leader. And just like, if you'd gone back a few years, you'd have profiled who are going to be the leaders of the climate change debate. You wouldn't have said a schoolgirl from Greta Thunberg. You wouldn't have said a TV documentary maker, David Attenborough, but they're the people whose voices have shared what other people wanted to say. So this inability to predict where leaders are coming from, I think we can trace it all back to the same cause. So in my research, I asked over 100 organisational leaders around the world to define what they thought were the core leadership traits or behaviours that they looked for in future leaders. They came up with over 30 that they felt were vital. I know a model which focuses on strengths that has 60 different strengths that you're supposed to develop. And you can see that any leadership program which is aiming to develop 30 at least different core skills is just impossible to deliver. So something obvious must be missing. There's something that's overcomplicating this. So I would like you to join your first discussion group. And what I would like you to do is, I'll give you some instructions in a moment, but the way you're going to do this is over on the left of your screen. You'll see the network icon. You go to network, you'll see some chairs, imaginary tables. You're going to join a table. And I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do this. I'd prefer you to keep the tables as small as possible. So that might be 4 people. So if you see a table that's already got 4 people, start another table. So there's 27 of you. So keep as few people to a table as you can. So I want you to think about this question. What is the one characteristic or skill or trait that you have that you would say is the secret of your career success? What is it about you that has given you an advantage in your career? So hopefully you've thought about this one something about you that if somebody said to you, if somebody came to you for mentoring or advice and they said to you, what's the secret of career success? You would say, well, you have to do, it's the advice you would give to somebody else. So, you might have struggled to think, what is it about me? What makes me special? Because we don't like thinking about ourselves and bragging sometimes. But you might think of it in terms of what advice would I give somebody else? It's the same answer it gives you. So I wanted to share a bit about the research that I did. The first clue which came out of my research is that those 30 leadership traits, they were viewed differently by different people. So not everybody said the same 30. Everybody said 2 or 3 or 4. A lot of them overlapped. And when we took out the ones that overlapped, what we were left with was 30. So not each individual saw leadership in the same way. Now we could probably have guessed that. What we really want to know though is there a way of predicting which person would value which trait? So if you went to one person and said, right, what are the leadership values that this person would talk about or would find valuable or would look for, could we predict what they are? And I think the answer is yes, we can. So over 300 people then helped with the next part of the research, which was figuring out the answer to that question. Can we predict a person's essentially their preferred choice of leader? Because we can't predict what a leader looks like for everybody, but we can predict what a leader looks like for one individual person. You see, if you ask a person what leadership trait they admire in themselves, what will happen is they will select that same trait as being important for other people. So, in fact, there's no consistency at all in what traits define leadership, but there's complete consistency in the type of person that any one individual will see as a potential future leader. In other words, the type of person who you will feel safe to follow is consistent for you, but is different to somebody else. So what does this mean? Well, it really means that when you're recommending or recruiting someone for a leadership role, you will prefer the person who most reminds you of yourself. And this gives us a really neat trick for success in any job interview. But that's not the subject of this session. If you're ever going for a job interview for a more senior position and you want to know what that neat trick is, then that's a good excuse for you to get in touch with me. What we need is a theory which unifies everything that we know about leadership, all of the hundreds of different leadership models and theories, into one simple model that can tell us how to develop leadership skills. That's what we really want to know. So let's consider another type of relationship that I hope you are familiar with, and that is love. Love's not a trait or a skill that a person can possess. A person can't be taught to love, because love is the relationship that emerges between two people. Yes, there are things that you can do that are more likely to lead to you being loved, and there are things that you can do to destroy love. But love isn't something that you can do to another person. When you say that you love someone, you're not talking about what you do, you're talking about how you feel. If I ask you what kinds of things you do to show love, you'll list things that symbolise love to you, not to someone else. You can't make someone love you by buying them flowers or taking them to dinner. When you fall in love, first of all, you're attracted to someone because you like them. You are like them. You recognise them as being like you. You have things in common. You've got shared interests or views. They represent some qualities which you admire, or maybe which you feel you lack. So you recognise them as someone who inhabits the same reality as you. And that sense of likeness, it develops into the love when the two of you enter into an agreement to put each other's needs first. You take care of them and they take care of you. Love is in the relationship. It's not in any one person. When one person prioritises their own needs over those of the other, the sense of love fades. I think selfishness is probably what starts many divorces. And we even use the language, don't we? In English, we look at two people and we say, they are in love. Like love is this place that they are inhabiting together, not in any one person. So similarly, in any situation where there's both complexity and uncertainty, our advantage as a social species comes from our ability to communicate, to share information about the situation. It gives us a clear advantage in terms of the speed of decision making. So when a decision is made to move in a particular direction, the community has to follow in unity, community, with unity as one. No one can predict the future. So a sense of safety comes from trust in the person who's making the decisions. That trust can be based on many different factors, including past experience and likeness. So when one person says things that you agree with, you feel that you are alike, you are on the same wavelength, and that builds trust. In a time of crisis, you're more likely to follow that person because you then expect them to act in your interests, because you think that they understand you. So the leaders who've emerged in the past 2 years in situations such as COVID and COVID in the climate crisis, they're not the people who said, hey, you need to do what I tell you to do. In fact, those people have created a much bigger problem, the problem of skepticism. So if someone puts themselves in a position of power and they're telling you you've got to wear a face mask or you've got to reduce your use of plastics, then logically they must be trying to manipulate you. They're not acting in your best interests. They're not on your wavelength. They don't understand you. They're not listening to you. They're not talking to you. So they must be trying to manipulate you. So it's logical to resist. So now we're seeing anti-lockdown protests. We're seeing riots across the world. And that's frustrating for the people who are trying to save lives. Now, during the Second World War, in countries across the world when bombs were falling, I don't know that we had people wandering on the streets or people protesting out on the streets trying to convince people during air raids that bombs were fake. You can see and you can feel bombs. You can't see or feel a virus until it's too late. Now, whatever your views on COVID or climate change are, it's important to understand that these are not your views. These are formed opinions. These are opinions that are given to you by other people. Such complex opinions about subjects that you're not experiencing firsthand. They are not formed by individual people. They're formed collectively. They're formed in response or opposition to the opinions of other people. So at a time of crisis, we're each reacting to these opinions, and what we're searching for is a clear sense of direction. And leadership, perhaps, is no more than that, a clear sense of direction. So fundamentally, a leader is the person who allows and creates an environment within which other people can feel safe. Now, you've probably heard that in 2012, Google, they ran an internal project. It was called Project Aristotle. And you can freely find the information and their research and findings online. It was aimed at discovering the secret ingredients of their highest performing teams. So what they did was they looked at the work of 180 teams from across the organisation, across the world, and high performance was as evaluated by executives, team leaders, team members, and performance against objectives, KPIs. Now, the single most important common factor across all teams was that team members felt a sense of psychological safety. What that means is that it's the feeling that team members could take risks, they could speak openly, they could expose their weaknesses, and they could be supported by their teammates and their manager. So what they discovered was that the high-performing teams had a manager or a leader who allowed the team to feel safe, who created an environment within which it was okay to speak up, it was okay to disagree, it was okay to be different, and people were still had a sense of belonging in that team. When you're in love, you feel safe because you trust that the other person will take care of you. You trust them not to hurt you. And when you're in a team, you feel safe for the same reason. You feel a sense of belonging. You're with people who are like you. You feel accepted and respected. So I've got another group discussion exercise for you. Let's see how we get on with it. And once again, in order to do this, you'll need to go to the left of your screen. I don't know if I'm pointing to the left of your screen. Currently I'm pointing to my little icon that says network. So you click on that, you'll see a bunch of tables. You pick a seat at a table and join it, and you'll join a little discussion room. What I would like you to do is, just for 10 minutes, I'd like you to think of somebody who you would regard as a leader, someone who you personally know. So maybe somebody in your family or your friends or somebody you've worked with, somebody who you trust. And what I want you to do is work out why you trust that person. What is it that they have done that makes it possible for you to trust them? And I would ask you to consider what you've learned in this session so far, and to think about then, what are the abilities that you have that would allow other people to trust you? So you thought about trust, what it is that makes you trust a leader. What is it that person did? Could have been something in the way that they treated you. It could have been something in the way that they made you feel included. It could have been something in the way that they were consistent, or that they did everything they could to meet their commitments and their promises. So these are common things that you might have thought about. Now, in the world of coaching, I often hear of people talking on sort of coaching training courses about the need to build trust at the start of a coaching relationship. And I've seen training courses for coaches that say you've got to invest a lot of time. It takes a long time to build trust, and the coach has to open up first. The coach has to make themselves vulnerable to show the client that it's safe for them to do so. It's rubbish, honestly. I don't know if you try it and get frustrated with it, but it's nonsense. if you're my coach, just because you want to open up and tell me all your secrets, that's got nothing to do with me. There is no causal relationship between you telling me stuff and me wanting to tell you stuff. I'm not going to trust you because you tell me things or because you make yourself vulnerable. You do whatever you like. I'll take care of myself. So the idea that the coach has to open up and make themselves vulnerable to show that it's safe to do so, well, of course it's safe for the coach to do so. The coach is running the session. The coach is creating the space and the working environment. So of course the coach knows it's safe. That doesn't convince me of anything. Just because it's safe for the coach doesn't mean it's safe for the client. And just because you've decided to share doesn't mean that I'm going to. It's nonsense. So what I would say is trust can be built very quickly. It's just that most people try to do it backwards. So let's think it through. When you've built trust with someone, you can ask them tough questions and you can share secret or intimate information, trusting that they will keep that confidential. They won't use it to hurt you. So you have an understanding of how they will act and react to what you're doing. Now, what if we turn this around? What if we ask someone a challenging question and then we have the courage to accept whatever answer they give? Surely, for us to ask the question and receive the answer, we must already have had trust. So my way of building trust is very simple. It's to assume that I already have enough trust for us to be having this conversation right now. And more trust will develop as it's needed because of my willingness to ask challenging questions and accept their truth in response. And for whatever they say in response, to be absolutely fine with me, no matter how worrying or shocking or concerning that thought is for them. For me, it's okay, just information. So the thing that makes change comfortable or scary is really whether you already knew that it was going to happen. If something changes and you already knew about it, like in organisational change, and this is very common in politics as well. This is something the British government does a lot. They'll say they're going to make a big announcement on Monday and then they'll leak it on Friday. And it will leak out through, we've got to find the source of the leak, we've got to find out the person who gave away this secret info. And they do it on purpose. Because then everybody thinks they found out through some secret method, so everybody feels special, like they're a spy or something. And everybody has the weekend to think about it and stew on it. And then come Monday, when the government makes this unpopular announcement, everybody thinks, I already knew about that. Yeah, I was already in on the secret. Yeah, somebody on Facebook told me via a meme that millions of other people saw. Yeah, I'm special. I knew that was going to happen. Yeah, I knew about that. And people feel safe because they knew that it was going to happen. Now, if you could really predict the future, you would never be surprised or caught off guard. So being able to predict the future would be quite a handy thing. You'd never be threatened because you would always be able to avoid a threat before it became a problem. Now, there are basically 3 ways that you can predict the future with great accuracy. First is if you create it. See, when you change something, when you plan ahead and decide what you're going to do, it's no surprise to you when you do it. So you feel comfortable because you're in control. So if you create the future, if you create the change, you feel safe because you're in control. Second way is if you've observed a repeating pattern, such as the rise and setting of the sun, changing of the seasons. It's no surprise when winter comes. You knew it was going to come. Or the habits of another person. That other people are incredibly predictable. And once you know somebody well enough to predict their habits, it's not a surprise to you when a certain thing happens. If a certain person gets angry about something, well, it's no surprise if you did the thing that made them angry. You kind of knew it was going to happen. So you feel safe then. And third, if you are relying and trusting in the promises of another person and those promises are delivered. So basically, if you're relying on somebody else to create the future and it's somebody who you trust, then they will say, this is going to happen, and it does. Or they will say, I'm going to do this, and they do it. That's the third way that you can predict the future. Let's put together all of these different factors that we've been talking about. Well, that I've been talking about and you've been listening attentively, and of course, thank you for that. Let's put all these different factors together. Number one, a leader's primary job is to create psychological safety. Number two, a leader is leading to a destination, the future. And the future is always unpredictable. Number three, a leader's main way of predicting the future is to do what they say they will do, because they're only in control of themselves. And number four, a leader's main way of controlling unpredictability is to give voice to the fears of their followers. This, in my view, is the single most important and most overlooked behaviour of a leader. When people are scared, the leader doesn't offer empty reassurance or vague soothing words. They give a voice to fears. They have the courage to say what everyone is thinking. And that courage is the force that unites their followers. It creates trust because now I can hear that someone is saying the things that have been going around inside my head. It doesn't make the fear go away, but now I know that someone understands me. Someone is speaking up on my behalf. People like Mahatma Gandhi and Lech Walesa were seen as leaders because they spoke up for the people who did not have a voice. Their courage united people and it gave them strength. Now, I want you to consider the people who are choosing to follow you. Now, you may not call yourself a leader, you may not have leader in your job title, but there are people in your life who are choosing to follow you. So these are the people who in your work or your family need you to create a safe environment in which they can be at their best. So I want you to think about what they're worried about and consider how this is also on your mind. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a really handy little simple way of remembering how to handle this kind of situation, how to very quickly build trust, create a safe environment so that you can move, so you can do something, take action to make things better. First is I want you to think about what it is that you're worried about in this time of unpredictability and change, and think about how this is the same fear for other people. Right at the beginning of this session, I asked you to think about, over the past 2 years, what has been the thing that has scared you personally the most. And I said that for me, it's the feeling that other people are taking actions which put me in danger and my family in danger, and that's completely out of my control. And they're taking action through what I would see as their naivety or them having been misled by other people who have different agenda to me, who are not trying to keep people safe and stay safe and survive all this, And a lot of people, a lot of us know people. We've lost people, maybe lost friends, family, people that we've worked with. We know of people who have been lost over the last couple of years, And when you've had that kind of experience, you want to protect other people from it. That's normal. And to be afraid when you can't protect people because of the actions of others, that's normal too. So, what I want the system that I'm going to give you, four letters, a nice little mnemonic that's going to help you to remember this. The first is to be honest with yourself. Like I said right at the beginning of the session when I said, think about what scared you over the past 2 years. The fear is an interesting experience. Fear hides. It's like a computer virus. Fear protects itself. It hides itself from you. So your first instinct when somebody says, what are you afraid of? Is to say, well, nothing. I'm not. That's fine. I'm perfectly happy. No, it's got nothing. No, it's totally normal. Your first instinct is to deny it, for the fear to hide inside of you. But if you're looking at another person, you'll see their fear. You'll see their fear manifesting in other behaviours, avoidance, even aggression. Lots of different ways that fear finds its way to the surface. So the first thing really is being honest with yourself, and to find the fear, to find that feeling, and to know that it's okay to feel that way. So don't dismiss it, find it, because that's the key to really making this leadership connection, this relationship that we've been talking about. So be honest with yourself. Second, acknowledge the fear. So put it into words, put it into as simple a phrase as you possibly can. Describe it in the simplest way that you can think of. Third, know and show that this is normal. That being afraid is totally normal in a dangerous situation. If you're not afraid, there's something wrong, because if you're doing something dangerous and you're not afraid, there's a chance that your kind of inbuilt self-protection mechanism isn't going to operate, isn't going to keep you safe. Something bad's going to happen to you. So feeling afraid is completely normal, and you've got to know that, and you've got to show that. So when other people say I'm afraid, you don't say, oh, don't be silly. Don't be silly. Nothing's good, bad. It's not going to happen. You show it by yes, you're acknowledging it, listening to people, showing that it's normal to be afraid. Fourth, you set a direction. This is not saying, right, this is what we're going to do. This is not a plan. It's not the details of, right, this is how we're going to solve all these problems. Because everybody knows how to solve the climate crisis. Everybody knows how to solve the pandemic. Doing it, that's, nobody thinks it's that easy, really. So this is not details. This is just about direction. Okay, if we go this way, this is going to lead us out of this situation. This is going to keep us safe. And the most important thing about direction is that we're moving together. We have our unity, our community. We are moving together. Where we're heading, not the details. So we've got honesty with yourself first, acknowledging the fear, normalizing, knowing and showing that it's normal to feel that way, and direction, setting a direction. So when you are accepting your role as leader, and like we've seen with people like Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough and the scientists who've been the voices of the pandemic, not the politicians, you have these people looking to you to create this safe environment for them. When you are accepting your role as leader, you offer your followers your hand. That's what you would do. If you were helping somebody, if you were leading the way, you would offer somebody your hand. And that's the acronym. Honesty, acknowledge, normalize, direction. Now, when I planned this session, my plan was that I would send you all off into these wonderful breakout rooms, and you would practice this with each other. So I think it's important to practice it, because it's the honesty and the acknowledging that's the important part. So what I'm going to suggest is, for anybody who wants to practice this, go off and join a network group, networking table as before. and practice being aware, being honest with yourself of what it is, what's the fear that you're feeling in this time that we are living through. And acknowledge, say out loud, put that into a phrase, and notice the other people around the table. Do they say, oh, that doesn't apply to me? Or do you get a little nod? Or a, yeah, I can relate to that. Normalise it. It's normal to feel that way in the situation that we're in. Set a direction. This is where we're going to go together. It doesn't matter what the direction is, because remember, when you are trusting someone to follow, you have no idea where you're going. You just trust to follow them. So what the direction is doesn't matter. That's why it's not helpful to have a detailed plan, because we all know that the future is unpredictable. And so when the leader is saying, we're going to do this and this is going to happen, and then we're going to solve this problem, and then we're going to do this, and everybody knows that as soon as a plan is one step away, it's a lie. Everybody knows that as soon as a plan goes outside of your control, where you can move your arms and legs, nobody knows what's going to happen at that point. So the leader promising this is going to be the outcome, like 2 years ago, politicians saying, yes, we'll have this pandemic all sorted in 6 months. Did you believe them? If you read history, if you lived through SARS or MERS or any of the bird flu or all the other epidemics, pandemics, the other things that we had, if you read any history, you'd know that's rubbish. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what's going to happen. But here's our first step. Here's what we're going to do together right now. That's believable. That has conviction. That's deliverable. Where will it take us to? I don't know. But the important thing is, wherever it takes us to, we will be there together. So this is the kind of thing I mean by direction. It isn't a plan, because you can't make a plan, because you don't know what's going to happen. And the people following you, they know that too. And you will lose trust by trying to plan in too much detail. Welcome back. Hello again. I've got a question. How would you suggest that I practice hand and generate trust in day-to-day activities at work? Well, if you're in a situation where you can see that people are reacting out of fear, so they're avoiding, they are getting aggressive, stressed, so I'm guessing that everyone can recognise the signs of stress in other people, being distracted, unable to focus, short-tempered, focusing on tasks which seem unimportant because they are filling their time in order to keep out of mind the things that are scaring them. So at any time of change, whether it's a pandemic or it's organisational change, you will recognise these signs of fear in other people. And if you're recognising in other people, you're probably feeling it within yourself. And if you're feeling it with yourself, then or you recognise yourself distracting, procrastinating, avoiding, getting short-tempered, getting aggressive. If you recognise these signs in yourself, you're not sleeping well, your eating patterns have changed, other people, your loved ones, are noticing a change in your behaviour. Somebody's saying to you, you look tired, or you seem anxious about something, or something like that. Don't brush it off and say, no, I'm fine. Be honest with yourself first and think, what is it that's going on? What is it that's scaring me? And then the second thing is then recognising that other people, they're afraid of the same thing. They're inhabiting the same environment. So that each person's situation is unique to them. But in general, the same thing is causing everybody the same problem. And I think what I've certainly seen in organisations a lot in the past, and managers I've had in the past, is when you say, here's something I'm worried about, their reaction is, oh, don't be silly, don't worry about that, don't worry, you just get on with your job, you leave the worrying to me, don't be, no, nothing bad's going to happen, don't be silly, and I would say, I think this is going to happen, or I think, this is going to change in our jobs, or we're going to get taken over by another. You don't know anything. Don't be silly. Of course not. Don't worry. And one of my first managers used to say, "Watch this space." He wouldn't never tell us anything. But by saying watch this space, he was saying that he knew something and he wasn't going to tell us. Didn't make people feel safe. So recognizing it, acknowledging it, giving a voice to it. And the emphasis on direction is direction together. So I think the very first thing in terms of practicing it is getting used to acknowledging that fear in yourself and then putting it into words for other people. And other people will either say yes or no. And the beauty of it is that when you're speaking, you're not asking other people to agree with you. When you're saying, here's something that I'm worried about, here's something I'm afraid of, you're not asking anybody to agree with you. You're just saying it. And what you'll find is if other people do agree with that, they will come closer to you. They will think, wow, yeah, that's exactly what's going on for me. And they will get the impression that you understand them. You're in the same boat, you're experiencing this together. And people will come together naturally for safety with people who they believe are like-minded. So just first of all, I think just practice just saying the acknowledge part and the normalizing part. Say, well, you know, it's normal. This is how people would are supposed to feel in a situation like this. You talk openly. I mean, I'll give you a very personal example. My father died in 2013, and he died after a relatively short illness, cancer, about 6 months. And at the end, he was in a hospice, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a hospital that people don't come out of. And my mother and my sister just wanted to deny that it was happening. So they would go, we'd go to visit him, and he would talk about, the situation that he was in. And my sister would say, "Oh no, don't say that. Don't say that. Don't talk like that. No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. You're going to get better." And he knew he wasn't, and I knew he wasn't. And when they'd gone, when I went to visit him by myself, I would talk to him about the reality of dying, and sort of reflect on his life and the situation that he was in. And that's acknowledging it. And that's not easy for the person leading that conversation, but if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. And just like when you're in love, the leader thinks, what do these people need to hear? The leader doesn't think, what do I want right now? They think, what do these people need to hear to feel safe? Because then what the leader's doing is creating a community of people within which the leader feels safe. And so to talk about that and to normalize that, and to create that sense of direction through this, it is definitely something to practice, because I think what most people are taught to do is to run away from that. If something's a bit uncomfortable, avoid it. If a subject is uncomfortable, change the subject. If as a coach a question feels a bit uncomfortable, don't ask it. And I'm saying do ask, because that's what builds trust. So if leaders can be trained to effectively follow hand, might it be possible for any team to become high performing? Well, that's a really interesting question. I think there are other factors. If we've got a team who feels safe, now there are some other factors. That team has to be united behind a common goal. They need to have a problem to solve, and they need to have the resources available to them to do that. So a team that has that sense of psychological safety will want to be together and will support each other. But if they don't know what they're supposed to be delivering, they'll just go around in circles. And if they know what they need to be delivered, but every step they take to try and deliver that, they're told, oh no, there's no budget, oh no, there's no resources, oh no, you can't go and talk to that person because they're in a different department and you'll have to approve it with their manager. If they're just hitting the culture all the time, then they're going to get pretty frustrated with that. The advantage is, I think in any organisation, those things will happen. But a strong team that has that sense of belonging and trust and safety will figure out how to overcome those challenges together. Whereas a team of individuals who don't trust each other, who don't have that sense of belonging and engagement, what will tend to happen is they'll hit the first obstacle and they'll scatter. Whereas the high-performing team, the team that's built trust, when they hit the first obstacle, they will tend to unite. They will tend to get together and say, hey, here's a problem I've just encountered. How can we solve it? How can we work together? How can we help each other to get through that? They will get together and they will talk about, oh, these are the problems in the culture. And rather than just saying, oh, yeah, it's terrible, terrible, they say, what can we do about it? And the person who's leading that team is the person who's setting the direction for that. The person who's leading the team is the person who's defining the problem, who's defining the challenge, who's saying, okay, so we've hit this barrier, so let's figure out how to do it. The opposite type of leader to that, the leader who doesn't build trust and safety, is the one who says, right, leave it with me, I'll sort it out, I'll think of a solution. Okay, that's totally disempowering the people in the team. You're saying we're all stupid and we can't think of a solution. So the leader that builds that community of safety is the one who's saying, I trust you to be smart enough to figure this out, and you tell me what you need from me. But here's the challenge that we've got to overcome. So we're coming up to the end of the time for this session. I mean, if anybody's got any final questions, then feel free to pop them in. Any tips on how to develop trust between team members? Yeah, the manager or the leader is absolutely central to that. And the simple key thing for the manager or leader to do is treat everybody equally. And whenever somebody speaks up, normalise it. You don't alienate people. Somebody makes a suggestion in a meeting you don't like, that's a stupid, and everybody laughs at them. You haven't just lost that person, you've lost that whole team, because everybody else now knows they could be next. So you protect the team. And if you've got one member of a team who's not following the rules, not playing their part, who is not playing their part within the team, you've got to get them out of the team. You've got to deal with that, because, for example, in a workplace, if one person turns up late every day and everybody else is there on time, everybody else is looking at that one person and saying, hey, if they're not getting in trouble for being late, then why am I getting here on time? I don't have to be here on time either. And within a very short space of time, that manager has lost control of the team. So we treat everybody equally. We have rules that everybody follows, and everybody knows that they can contribute their best because they know that everybody else is contributing their best. And if somebody has an off day, the team knows that it's an off day and the team will carry them. But it's when one person starts to, like in a relationship, like in love, when one person starts to exploit that relationship only for their advantage, that relationship isn't going to last very long. In the workplace, we have this odd situation where people can carry on doing that for years and they never get fired, because they just get passed from one team to another, one manager to another, and what happens is that behaviour gets reinforced. So if as a manager you're seeing behaviour that doesn't fit within how you're defining your team, you've got to speak to that and single that out, and you've got to stop that, and if necessary be prepared to remove the person from the team. You always have that. You always have that at your disposal as a manager, and that's not a threat. It's a way of keeping everyone else in your team safe. If you've got one person if you're leading people on, say, some outdoor trek, some adventure weekend, something like that, and one person's doing something that's dangerous and is endangering the other people in the group, you don't tolerate that. Your focus is on keeping the group safe, not pandering to any individual member and what they want to do. The focus is keep everybody together, keep everybody safe. And I think HAND is the way to do that. And when you do that, then the team members learn to trust each other because of their trust in the unity of the team, that everyone's following that leader and therefore must have something in common. And if the leader encourages them to talk to each other as well. I think a lot of times leaders put themselves at the centre of the team. Everything's got to come through me. I think in certain parts of the world that's still very much the corporate culture, but it's changing because of globalisation. So when we've got a manager who says all decisions have to come through me, all approval has to come through me, the team members don't have to trust each other, and they won't. But when the leader says, okay, you're the team, you've got what you need, you decide what to do, you work this out and tell me what you need from me, what help you need from me. I think that's the way to build trust, to get them to talk to each other. So that's it. We're pretty much there on time. I think that I think you might be thinking, well, is there a downside of leadership? And there is. It means that for you as the leader, there's a lot of pressure on you to know where you're going. But remember, you've only ever got to know one step ahead. Once people start following you, you have a responsibility to them, whether you like it or not. And when you're leading at a time of change that's imposed by the outside world, as we all have been for the last 2 years, people will look to you for safety and security first, and then they will follow you afterwards. So you don't need to have a plan, just focus on safety first. When you're a leader and you want to create change, you can use the same principles. Because if your followers are ready for change, if they see all the same problems that you want to solve, your words will give a voice to their doubts. So you can use the same method. Your words will give a voice to their doubts, their fears, and their hopes and aspirations as well. When you dream, you share that dream with your followers, and it's that dream that creates the future. So thank you all for choosing to watch this session, to take part in it. There is a recording of this session that's going to be available at some point in the very near future. As I said, yes, in my exhibition booth there are handouts. If you follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn, then you will see an article will appear later today about this session that I've just run. And I hope you enjoy your role as a leader in the future. Enjoy leading others to the dreams that you create together. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend and enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you so much.